If you've been following along with us this month, you know that we're talking about so many of the beautiful places that we've lived in this world in the past few years. We've really taken the month to kind of like review these places and have done videos already on Sydney, Australia, Phnom Penh, Cambodia, Vancouver, Toronto, and now we're making a video on the Okanagan in British Columbia. So we should start by saying that we know that the Okanagan isn't really a city. It consists of multiple cities, including Kelowna, Penticton, Vernon, Lake Country, West Kelowna, Summerland, and Peachland. And then of course little surrounding like townships in between. But that said, we are going to be talking about the Okanagan kind of in general and our experience living just outside of Vernon and working just outside of Kelowna. And you worked in Summerland for a bit too.
Yeah. Okanagan is definitely a place that has been on our minds recently because we are returning back there soon, and it's a place that we will be getting married next year. I guess the first place to start is the beauty of the Okanagan. An incredibly beautiful place to live. You're surrounded by mountains, and I mean, if you're not surrounded by them, you're living on mountains. There are lakes everywhere, all over the Okanagan, like beautiful, beautiful freshwater lakes. Lots of little lakes everywhere and beautiful spots that you can swim, that you can go boating, fishing, you know, whatever you're into.
When I think about the Okanagan, and even having lived there in not the summer, I always imagine the Okanagan in the summer. Like it's like the summer destination. It's clean, and of course living in Canada, you reap all the benefits of the great healthcare, education, all that we mentioned in our past videos. Yeah, it is. It's just really so beautiful. It doesn't at all look like the Lower Mainland.
No. A lot of Canadian celebrities, and especially Canadian athletes, they all have Okanagan like summer houses that they go to with their families and things like that because it's just absolutely gorgeous, especially in the summertime.
Yeah, it's beautiful and so different. And I think that we should mention here, if you're doing your research about Canada, say this is the first video that you landed on and you haven't really like looked into the geography of British Columbia yet, if you're planning on moving to Kelowna or you're considering visiting Kelowna or moving to Kelowna, it's not close to Vancouver. So these are two totally different parts of British Columbia. You can of course drive there, you can take a bus there, and you can take a plane there. There's an airport in Kelowna, but if you're planning a trip or a move to British Columbia, it's really important to mention when you say Kelowna or the Okanagan, it is not at all talking about Vancouver, the Lower Mainland, or even further away, Vancouver Island. Totally separate things. Even in the way that the lifestyle is, and especially the climate is. So I really want to mention the climate. So the Okanagan in general has the Canadian climate. Really hot summers, really cold winters, lots of snow in the winters.
Tons of snow.
Really beautiful autumns, like the colors of the trees change, they shed their leaves. It's like the textbook definition of all four seasons. There's tons of snow in the winter, but the summers get so hot. And there is sadly problems there sometimes in the summer when it comes to forest fires, so that is something that you have to consider when you think about the Okanagan and being there in the summertime.
It was last year that they had, or was it, no, the year before.
The year before it was really bad.
The year before they had really bad forest fires, and it was, I mean, my parents live up there and they were saying to us that it was hard for them to breathe.
We don't want to scare people away from moving to the Okanagan because we were living there last summer and it was fine.
Yeah.
You never know. Really, wherever you live in the world, you never know what's going to happen. That is a reality of living up in the Okanagan and handling those extreme seasons. But like we said in our Vancouver video, if you watched that as well, there are activities for every season. So if you're a skier, snowboarder,
snowmobiler.
Snowmobiler.
A lot of people here like to snowmobile, but some people over there do too.
Beach volleyball, boating, tubing, water skiing.
These are all great wintertime sports that you can take a part
I'm saying that you can, if you are a sporty, there's an activity for every season. If you're a winter sport person and then you're also a summer sport person, guess what? You can do both things up there.
And good news for those of you who don't want to take part in sports. It is like the wine capital of BC, so there are tons of wine tours, tons of amazing wine all across the Okanagan. So if you're not too into sports, in the summertime you can go on tons of wine tours and
get drunk on the beach.
And get drunk on the beach. And, well, I mean, get drunk and then go to the beach.
Yeah.
But.
So on that note, we should mention the vineyards. It really is the land of like vineyards, orchards,
Tons of orchards.
Yeah, tons of orchards, beaches, and then we have to say vineyards again, because this is actually like a huge draw of people who want to visit the Okanagan, people who want to live in the Okanagan, people who want to make a living making wine in the Okanagan. I have a really good friend from high school that does that. So yeah, when I'm painting the picture of the Okanagan, it is all of those things. And living there, you really feel it. It's not like how sometimes you have an idea of somewhere and then when you live there, it's a totally different thing. It is 100% the same place that you go and you rent a cabin. When you're living there, you're really living that lifestyle, and everyone around you is living that lifestyle as well.
Unlike somewhere like here in Ontario, where the heat is very, very humid, so you can go outside and it'll be 30 degrees, but it can feel like 40 degrees, and it's just thick, hot heat. Over in the Okanagan, it's about 35 to 40 degrees, but it's a very dry heat.
So within the Okanagan, Kelowna is really the main city, like the biggest city. A lot of people work in Kelowna, but they live outside of Kelowna and other areas of the Okanagan. I remember like a few years back, because I went to high school in Vancouver, you obviously grew up in Chilliwack, so we both grew up in BC, and now I'm aging myself here because like I would like for people to think that I'm still in high school, but you know, we're talking 10 years ago. Moving to Kelowna as like a young adult was like a cheaper option, something to do for young people that were looking to start their careers. As of lately, the costs of living in Kelowna have actually been creeping up. It's oddly not that cheap to live in Kelowna. I wouldn't say it's quite as expensive as living in Vancouver, but it's definitely as expensive as living in some parts of Vancouver and living in the greater Vancouver area. Renting an apartment or buying a house in Kelowna is actually kind of expensive now. So that's something that's definitely changed even in my time about, you know, learning about the Okanagan, visiting the Okanagan, and then living in the Okanagan.
Speaking of Kelowna, we talk about it like it's a big city, which in the Okanagan it's the biggest city, but it's not a big city. It's nothing like Vancouver is a big city, and we don't even consider that to be a big city, especially in comparison to somewhere like Toronto. It is the biggest city.
Like their airport is tiny.
Oh, it's a tiny airport. Yeah, it's mostly domestic flights. There are a few international flights.
And it's funny because people who live in the Okanagan, and like I'm honestly not judging, I totally understand, but you start to really feel like Kelowna is like the Big Apple, you know? And then it's like, when you look at Kelowna and how small it actually is and how many people there actually are there, it's not really a big city at all. It's not a pro or a con, and again, I'm not judging, it's just kind of a funny thing that happens when you move there. You start to think of Kelowna as this like big city, but it's really not a big city in the grand scheme of things.
So that can be a pro or a con for people. If you want to live somewhere that has a city-ish sort of feel to it, Kelowna's great for that.
I actually really like Kelowna as a city. Like I really like Kelowna. I like the way that it's progressing, and I'm sure that there's problems with it like there are in any cities in the entire world. Literally anywhere there's going to be problems and pros and cons, but I actually like Kelowna, and I totally get it. I mean, it drew us in, and we're going back, so.
We should have mentioned Osoyoos, because it really goes to show how diverse the climate is.
Is Osoyoos in?
It's the hottest place in all of BC.
But is it in the Okanagan? Is Osoyoos the Okanagan? I know, I'm bad. I'm wrong. We literally had to Google if Osoyoos is considered the Okanagan.
Okay.
Oh, I love Osoyoos. I didn't really realize that it was a part of the Okanagan, but we got this mixed up in our I mean, I lived in Vancouver for 10 years, so sometimes it's hard to keep track when you're all over the place. Let's mention Osoyoos, because we have to. It
really goes to show how diverse the Okanagan can be. So if you go up north, there are like foresty areas, like wildlife kind of forest, bears and all that kind of stuff. Or you can go to Osoyoos, which is just a little bit more south, down towards the border actually. And it's a desert. So I mean, BC, it's also the hottest place in all of BC. I mean, at least on their sign. It's a desert.
It's a desert.
So yeah, it's a literal desert.
It is so interesting that, I mean, BC is so diverse, and it really goes to show, because then if you start to talk about other parts of BC, that's a whole other ballpark. But yeah, the Okanagan within itself already has such diversity. But something I do want to mention about Kelowna is that it's kind of like the perfect size city in the sense that anything that you need or anything that you want, you can get it there. You don't really feel like you're out in the middle of nowhere when you have Kelowna nearby. So that's actually true for many of the towns. Like Vernon is the same thing. Like you can get pretty much anything that you need in Vernon. You definitely don't feel like you're isolated from society in the Okanagan, and we don't want to make it seem that way at all. It's just its own area of Canada, really.
The Okanagan as a whole is a big tourist attraction for a lot of people. You have a lot of expats who will come from Australia or other places, and they'll come to do berry picking or work in the vineyards or things there. So there's lots of opportunities if you're an expat wanting to come and explore BC and you don't want to go to Vancouver, doing those kinds of things.
Yeah,
or other jobs for that matter.
Or like hotels or golf courses. Like there's all that kind of stuff there. And like we said in the Vancouver video as well, like it's just, honestly, it's a playground for people who love the outdoors. Like I said earlier, camping, boating, hiking, cycling, like whatever you want to do, it really is a paradise for people who love that kind of stuff. And I think that's why it attracts so many people from all over the world. Anyways, we personally really like living in the Okanagan. That's why we're not taking it out of the picture of what we want to do in our future. We're getting married there next year, so we have a lot of stuff to do up in the Okanagan in the next little while here. If you're considering Kelowna, or the surrounding areas for your next trip, or you're planning on moving there, we really recommend it. It's a really, really beautiful place, and we don't really have too many bad things to say about it, honestly. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.